You know, sometimes the truest measure of a person is only discovered after they're gone. And that's exactly what happened when, after this man's death, they found mysterious marks on his shoulders. That story, well, it unlocks the incredible life and legacy of the fourth Shia Imam, Ali ibn al-Hussein. He's known by this beautiful title, Zayn al ʿābidīn, which means the adornment of the worshippers.
But his whole life really revolves around one powerful question. A question that frames everything he did. How do you lead after a catastrophe? I mean, really think about that. When your entire world has just been shattered, what does it even mean to lead?
And for Imam al-Sajjad, this was not some abstract philosophical problem. This was his reality. After the massacre at Karbala, he was the only adult male from his immediate family left alive. Just imagine the weight of an entire community, this sacred spiritual lineage, it all came crashing down right onto his shoulders.
So to really get a handle on the kind of leader he became, we have to go back to the event that forged him, that crucible, the aftermath of Karbala in the year 680. Now, he wasn't a fighter on the battlefield. Actually, a severe illness kept him out of the combat, and that's the only reason his life was spared. But what happened next, that was a whole other kind of battle. He was captured right along with the women and children of his family. Historical sources tell us he was bound by something called a jamia, this brutal, heavy chain that yoked his hands to his neck, and in shackles he was marched all the way to Damascus. But here's the amazing part. Even in chains, in the very heart of his enemy's power, he refused to be silent. He stood up and became a voice for the truth, completely dismantling the official story and making sure his father's sacrifice wasn't in vain. Okay, so you've witnessed all this horror. What's your next move? Do you call for blood? For an immediate armed uprising to get revenge? Imam al-Sajjad, he took a totally different path. It was strategic, it was calculated, and we can call it a strategy of pious resistance. And this idea really defines his entire imamate. Now, pious resistance, don't mistake that for being passive. It's not. It is an active, non-violent strategy to rebuild your community from the inside, to strengthen it spiritually, ethically, especially when you know that another open fight would mean total annihilation. That was the hard-learned lesson of Karbala. So he had a choice to make, right? You had movements like the Tawababun rising up, demanding armed revenge. And you can understand why. But the Imam? He kept his distance. He knew, with absolute certainty, that another military campaign would just wipe out the few who were left. His mission had to change. It couldn't be about political confrontation anymore. It had to be about survival and spiritual preservation. So if you don't have an army and you don't have a state, how on earth do you lead? Well, you lead by becoming the example, an example so pure, so virtuous, that no one can question it. His authority wasn't political at all, it was moral. And it was built on a foundation of personal character that became legendary, even while he was still alive.
You can see this just by looking at the titles people gave him. These weren't titles he was born with. He earned every single one of them. Take al-Sajjad. That means the one who is constantly prostrating in prayer. Or even more powerfully, Dhu Lathafanat, the possessor of calluses. That's a direct reference to the calluses on his forehead, his hands, and his knees from just constant, unending prayer.
I mean, to put a number on it, the famous scholar from Medina, Malik ibn Anas, reported that the Imam would perform 1,000 units of prayer, 1,000 rakah, every single day. Can you even imagine? That level of devotion is how you earn a title like the adornment of the worshippers.
But this wasn't just going through the motions, It wasn't some mechanical ritual. It came from this deep, profound place of awe. People noticed that he would actually tremble before he started his prayers. And when they asked him why, he simply said, "Woe betide you. Do you know whom I am going to stand in front of and before whom I am going to pray?" That just shows you the mindset behind it all.
And this incredible piety wasn't just for the prayer mat. It spilled over into everything he did, especially his compassion for others. Remember those mysterious marks on his shoulders I mentioned at the beginning? Well, here's the story. Every night he would secretly carry heavy sacks of food to the poorest families in Medina. Nobody had a clue it was him. It was only after he passed away, when they were preparing his body for burial, that they saw the deep marks and calluses on the shoulders from the weight of the sacks. That's when they put it all together. He also did something that was for its time just revolutionary, a kind of social engineering really. He would systematically buy slaves, but not to use them for labor. He would bring them into his home teach them, educate them in Islamic ethics and knowledge, and then he would set them free. Think about what he was doing here. He wasn't just freeing people one by one. He was building a brand new community, a network of people loyal not because of tribe or blood, but because of shared values and gratitude. He was restoring dignity to the people who had been stripped of it.
So his leadership was built on personal virtue, for sure. But it was also deeply intellectual. In an environment where giving an open lecture could get you killed, he had to be creative. He channeled all of his teachings into these incredible texts that could be passed down safely, creating a kind of ethical blueprint for his followers.
His absolute masterpiece is a book called al-Sahifa al-Sajjadiyya. Now, on the surface, it's a book of prayers, but it is so much more than that. It's a genius move, really. In a politically corrupt and dangerous time, he used the intimate, personal, and safe language of prayer to teach everything: theology, ethics, social conduct, a complete Islamic worldview. It was a direct line to God for his followers, bypassing the corrupt powers of the day.
And then you have his Risalat al-Huquq, his treatise on rights. This thing is just stunning. It outlines more than 50 different rights and responsibilities that people have toward each other, and the scope is incredible. It covers the rights of God, sure, but also the rights of your own limbs, your tongue, your stomach, the rights of your mother, your neighbor, your children, and get this, even the rights of your enemy. It's basically a blueprint for a just and compassionate society.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, his followers loved him, but his influence went way beyond that. His moral and intellectual authority was so massive that it just transcended all the sectarian lines of the day. And this isn't just a matter of belief. The historical record on this is crystal clear.
Let's take a look. We have praise from Muhammad ibn Muslim al-Zuhri. Now, for those who know, this is a huge deal. He's one of the foundational scholars in the Sunni tradition for collecting hadith. For him to praise the Imam is major.
And it doesn't stop there. Imam Shafi'i himself, the founder of one of the great Sunni schools of law, he flat out said that Zayn al ʿＡābidīn was the best jurist, the most knowledgeable legal scholar in the entire city of Medina, and Medina at that time was the absolute center of the Islamic scholarly world.
And to top it off, you have the famous intellectual al-Jahiz, who wrote later that basically everyone agreed on the Imam's excellence. It was a universal consensus. Nobody even argued about it. So when you have these towering figures from outside his own community saying this, you're not dealing with opinions anymore. You're looking at a historical fact.
So this incredible life, which began in the trauma and shadow of Karbala, would eventually come to an end, and in a way that was tragically familiar for his family. It was the final act that cemented his entire legacy of pious, principled resistance.
The historical accounts state that he was martyred, poisoned on the orders of the Umayyad Caliph al-Walid. And why? Because a man with that much moral authority is always a threat to a corrupt ruler's worldly power. He was laid to rest in the al-Baqi cemetery in Medina, right next to his uncle, Imam al-Hassan.
And that really brings us full circle. The life of Imam Zayn al ʿAābidīn is proof that real, lasting authority doesn't come from armies or palaces. It's built on spiritual strength, on moral courage, on personal excellence. And that leaves us with a pretty powerful question to think about for our own lives, doesn't it? In our world, which is just filled with constant noise, anger, and public confrontation, what can we learn from a legacy that was built in quiet devotion?